Welcome back to the channel. Today I have something very unusual. This is a DEFCON Jungle Knife Peregrine. I saw this knife. It is wild. I had to look at it. I had to see it. I had to review it. So let's jump into the review. What I'm going to do today is a little different. I'm going to talk about how the knife looks. I'm going to talk about how the knife feels, and I'm going to talk about how the knife works. So this thing quite obviously looks wild. It has a Damascus blade. It has some beautiful patterning on the Damascus there. It has a titanium handle with this kind of copper anodizing that kind of looks like a Damascus. I'm not sure what the process is entirely there. This is definitely anodized down here on the pommel. So not quite sure there, but it is really cool. They have a copper looking one, they have a brass looking one, and they have a more raw titanium one. You have a round look on the pocket clip there. You got some standoffs on the pocket clip, which is an unusual look. This thing is just super cool. It also has a blue anodized bolt for the pivot there, if you would like that look better. Just crazy skeletonizing on the handle. This thing is so light. I think it's really beautiful. It is definitely different. If you like it, I mean, wow, look at that thing. It is just so different, and I love that about it. How does this thing feel? Well, it's incredibly light. If you have a well-engineered knife, it's generally accepted that it'll be an inch of blade per ounce of knife. This thing is way lighter than that. This is a 4-inch blade, and this thing is under 3 ounces. It's just super light. Weight on this knife is 2.6 ounces. That is incredibly light, especially for a knife that has almost 4 inches of blade. Size, here is it next to a kind of similarly shaped Benchmade 940 Osborne. Here it is next to a Hogue Deca. So very slender, very long knife. Here's my standard Benchmade Griptilian. So very long, very slender knife. It does balance pretty good despite the fact that it's such a lightweight knife. If I have that on my finger, it's not going to fall off, right? It doesn't get blade heavy just because it's so light, which is pretty impressive given that they have gone with a relatively sturdy thickness on the blade there. It's not super thin. It is narrow this way, which helps a lot in making that get the balance right without being too fragile. The action is not exceptional. It's a little rubbery. I will probably loosen this up a bit. Let's loosen it up now just to make sure that we're getting an accurate feel on the action there, because I feel like it's a little tight from the factory. This is not a D-shaped pivot, it's just a straight round pivot. 2 T8s. So once I loosen it, still don't have any blade play. That does improve the action somewhat, but it's still not super smooth. So I would say the action is okay, but not exceptionally good there. It does feel comfortable. They've done well at rounding all of the edges. There's nothing that's going to catch your finger or anything. Even this pocket clip that does look a little sharp isn't uncomfortable in the hand. For general cutting, it's quite good. There was some chafing given all these relieved out areas when I did my extended cutting tests. That's kind of to be expected. It's not really designed for that. This is a gentleman's folder. It's a light use knife, although this is built sturdy enough, we'll see when we take it apart, to do some decent work, but you would never mistake this for a work knife, right? This is a showpiece. So let's talk about how it works since we're heading that direction. How does this thing work? Well, it went 375 cuts in my dowel edge retention test, which is quite good for Damascus. That's some of the best Damascus that I've ever tested. It is a Sanmai Damascus, which you can see. So they've left that solid core in there, which makes sure they get the edge that you want, or the steel that you want rather, on the edge. good decision. It has worked well. I can't complain at all about the edge retention. Flat surface cutting, obviously this is a Wharncliffe blade. It's almost completely straight. There's only a very slight curve to that blade. So it's not going to cut great on a flat surface. You're going to be cutting with just the tip, which you can see in my video here. Rope, it does extremely well. Because you have such a long, straight cutting surface, it cuts rope like butter. Very good design for cutting rope, cutting strings, anything like that, which fits well with the usage profile of a kind of gentleman's folder knife. It's definitely long enough to cut fruit or anything like that. Let's talk engineering. So to do that, we are going to disassemble it. Let's jump right in. We will pull off the pivot, and then we'll get the other bolts out. So there's not a lot holding this knife together. There's only 3 bolts, which is plenty given how light it is. It's not really designed to be a hard use knife, like I said. It's designed to look really cool and be very light and still come in as a usable knife. Here's the other 2. I'm just going to try taking this one side off and see how that goes. I don't think these bolts are in the pocket clip. Okay, they are not. These are just holding on this right-hand side. As far as engineering goes, there are a few sacrifices to lightness here. The frame lock is quite light. I'll show you here the frame lock. You can see when I push on it, it does flex pretty easily. It does seem to lock up securely, but that's not overbuilt by any means. It's very light. It's just kind of not a lot of metal left there. The stop pin, you can now see, travels with the blade as it goes. Fully enclosed there, which means you do run the risk of stopping on some dirt, but that's a pretty sturdy way to do a stop pin. So I've got no issues with the durability of that. Lock shelf is kind of small, but again, that's not too unexpected given that this is a gentleman's folder knife and not a work knife or anything like that. There's the washers for the bearings, keep the titanium from getting damaged. They have recessed the bearings into the blade here. I'm not a huge fan of that design. We've talked about that before on this channel. They're not very big bearings, so there's plenty of blade left in there. As you can see, it's not like it's a huge durability concern. Again, given that this is a gentleman's folder and not a hard use knife. Not my favorite design, but it works well for this knife. I can see why they've done it. It was probably the right decision on something that's going to be this light. Back spacer is there. It will come off if you pop it off. It's just kind of slid on there. You can see it pops off if I wanted to work it off of there. It will come off just pulling that way. I'm not going to take it off. I don't want to take off the pocket clip or anything. So pretty simple disassembly. Nice and easy to get it off on one side. I like that. That's a good design to be able to take it apart that easily. What are my conclusions on this knife? If you want a gentleman's folder that is a showstopper, I mean showpiece quality gentleman's folder knife, and you don't want to spend a whole lot of money, this is a pretty fantastic choice. It's not, not a hard use knife. It's not designed for that, but it does have well thought out engineering, and it's only about $100. I'll put a link to purchase one down in the description. I was skeptical about this knife. Slotted Damascus is not of the greatest quality, but this is just fine, and it's absolutely beautiful. You should be able to find a color to match your wardrobe. So ends up being a pretty highly recommended knife.